Hello and welcome to episode 7 of Analyst Spar. We've had a short hiatus. We've not been on for a couple of months. We've been a bit busy, so apologies for that. But really glad you could join us for this episode, which is going to be quite an interesting one. I have joining us today from Aldershot Town, a very good friend of mine, one of the politest people you'll ever meet in football, and I speak from experience on that. But it's Aldershot's Academy Director, Waleed Khan. Hi, Waleed. Thanks for joining us.
Richard, thank you very much for those kind words. The tenner's in the post.
Yeah, just a tenner. Oh, I didn't mention he's also the tightest bloke in football as well. Yeah.
Well, you know, since I've got into football, I've learnt about agents' commission, so that's where most of it's gone.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I should just say that obviously we don't have Colin with us at the moment, but he will be joining shortly. He was just unable to get here for the start of the show. So, Waleed, you came up to Nottingham at the weekend, sat in the posh seats and enjoyed a good game of football, I think. Well, probably better from a Notts perspective, but I think you guys were quite buoyed by the performance overall.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, first up, always love coming up to Notts. Fantastic hospitality. People very, very nice, other than some other places, which we shan't name. No. But yes, lovely. And I love the stadium. Absolutely. I was trying to get onto the hallowed turf, but the red zone still exists. So I didn't breach the protocols. Okay. Yes, I mean, we've had a tough start to the first team. I mean, I'm not going to speak for the first team manager, but everybody knows that we've had a tough start. And there have been loads of positives, and certainly coming up to one of the bigger teams who we look up to and admire. Yeah, we were buoyed. We were extremely disappointed not to come away with a point. Would have been our first point, and it would have been a good point to have had. But yeah, talking to the players and getting back into the training arena with them after the game when they came back, and then speaking to players directly as well. Yes, a lot of positives, and everybody felt. I think buoyed is a good word. I think that's a good adjective. Yeah. I think we're buoyed, and we've just got to take it forward now, as the boys keep saying.
Excellent. Okay, so from a Notts perspective, then, having watched the game, was there anybody in particular that impressed you?
I loved your number 6. Absolutely loved your number 6. Having played midfield back in the previous century, that's how old I am.
Okay.
To see it's Jim O'Brien, isn't it? I think
it is Jim. Yeah, Jim. Yeah.
And of course, as you said, I was sat in the posh seat, so we had a wonderful view of watching him make those manic late runs, and his energy levels were just outstanding. But also what I liked was I loved his movement, and I was kind of screaming down to our bench. Of course, they can't hear me, where he was playing not just between the lines, but he was playing between 3 of us players. And every time he was unmarked, and a very smart player. And I loved his game. Absolutely my kind of player, energy, commitment for the team. Didn't complain, because I think of the 30-odd runs he probably made, he probably only got 2 that somebody looked up and said, "Oh, there he is," pass it to him. But he kept going. So loved it.
Yeah, I think you've probably picked up on one of the frustrations from a fan's perspective there, and probably from Ian Birchnell's as well, in that there were so many of those runs that Jim was making. But also on the other side, you'd got Dion Kelly-Evans as well at right wing back, that so many times in that first half found themselves in very good positions, and Jim's ability to pick out these third man runs is quite something, and it's something he's always had about him. And unfortunately, we just didn't really play when he played last season under Neil Ardley. We didn't seem to play to his strengths in that respect. But certainly, we're seeing more of that now. We certainly saw a lot of it first game of the season when we beat Barnet, because 2 of the goals were basically because of Jim and his runs. But now that we've got the players as well that are deep, that can actually play the ball. A big plus for Notts at the weekend was having Alex Lacey back at centre half.
Yeah,
he's been out for a long time. but he's such a good footballer, you know, not just as a defender, but his ability, you know, to pick out a pass with the ball, which he did actually with a long ball through to Rodriguez who then teed up Kyle Wotton for the opening goal. So yeah, and it's great that you've mentioned Jim as well, because normally people will sit down and the first thing they'll say is oh yeah, Ruben Rodriguez was great. Oh yeah, Cal Roberts looks a player, but everybody knows that already. Yeah. So to give Jim O'Brien the credibility that you just have done is fantastic to hear. So right, I believe actually that we've got Colin who's ready to join us now. So if you just bear with us, folks.
Sure.
Here we are. Hi, Colin.
How are we doing? You're all right?
Yeah, good. Thanks, Colin. Waleed, Colin.
Hi, Colin.
Hiya. You're right there.
I'm good, thank you. Yes, thank you for having me on.
Colin, just to bring you up to speed, I've just given Waleed a bit of an introduction, and we were just talking about Saturday's game. And in particular, Waleed was just saying how impressed he was with Jim O'Brien and his movement, which was really refreshing to hear. So yeah, I don't know if you've got any thoughts on that as well. I was just saying that it's always the likes of Ruben Rodriguez and Callum Roberts who seem to get the plaudits, but to have someone like Jim be noted for his work as well was really nice to hear.
Yeah, I think it was an interesting tactical decision, really, because and I think a lot of credit should go to Aldershot in terms. I was really impressed with certainly their attacking threat and their attacking intent, because I'd imagine Ian Birchnell would have been aware of that and kind of had to probably toss a coin between playing Ed Francis, who's slightly more defensive, and sitting in front of that, you know, that back three and protecting it a little bit, or going for someone slightly more offensive like Jim offers. And obviously he went for the attacking threat. Obviously, I think in hindsight, it would have been probably nicer to have Ed Francis sitting a little bit to offer that kind of defensive protection. But then, you know, what Jim offers in terms of, you know, attacking moves going forward and really kind of supporting that kind of sort of counter-attacking threat that Notts offer is great to see, really. And I think you know, one of the things that's fascinating this season is Ian Birchnell's sort of determination to change shape and change movement, which is something, without wanting to start a debate over Ian Birchnell and Neil Ardley, was something that not necessarily Neil often did, was change shape. He'd obviously maintained things till probably about the 70th minute was the stereotype, and then we'd probably throw a like for like option on, whereas Ian Birchnell quite clearly sort of changed shape, changed dynamics, and I think, you know, obviously on the grand scheme of things, got things right, really.
Yeah, absolutely. We were just talking as well before we came on air, myself and Waleed, about Aldershot's scorer of the 2 goals for Aldershot, Corey Andrews, and maybe you can just give us a little bit of an insight into Corey, because it's not somebody that many of us would have known about, Waleed, before now.
Yeah, I mean, likewise for us, really, as well. It was like a left field appointment when he was selected to play. We saw him as a trialist. He came to us as a trialist, bizarrely, and we had a number of pre-season games, and he started to come on and play in that number 9 role effectively, because we've had challenges with our number 9, Mo Bettemar, who's been in and out, and he's again injured, so Mo wasn't there, and so he's kind of taken that mantle to play in that role. And we weren't so sure. When I say we, that's the royal we, the fans. We weren't so sure about whether he was going to be strong enough, because for his sins, we were going to be comparing him against Harrison Paniato, who could, although he was small in stature, but tremendous at holding up the ball. And we were all just thinking he might be a bit too light to be actually playing against some of the defenders in the National League. They are big defenders. Well,
sorry, Waleed. Yeah, just to say on that, when you look at his 2 goals on Saturday, to say you had concerns about his strength, that came to the fore with both goals, and none more so than the second goal, which I thought was a fantastic goal. I think Kyle Cameron was a bit too soft in the challenge. It was very clever play from Corey as well, and a very well taken goal. So maybe some of those concerns that you had about his strength initially are probably starting to be allayed a little bit now.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And the bizarre thing is, he scored all 3 goals that we've scored this season thus far.
Yeah.
And the first one was a header against Yeovil. Really good glancing header, got in front of his defender, timed the jump and didn't overhit it, just let it glance and it flew into the top corner. But he scored 3 difficult goals, if you like. There's no easy goal, but these have been 3 difficult goals, and where perhaps, if we're going to be critical, he's had a couple of chances prior to these difficult goals, which ordinarily you'd have expected him to bury. So yeah, we're happy. We're happy.
Good.
Absolutely.
Good. What were your thoughts on his performance, Colin?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, one of the standout things was his strength. I was in the family stand, so his first goal was in close proximity to me, and I thought, not only the strength but also the ability to turn Kyle Wootton. He really sort of rolled him, and for the second, although from a very different position on the pitch, but again was able to kind of roll Kyle Cameron and create that chance. And I think from a Notts perspective, offered us an interesting sort of dilemma, really, another insight into who is essentially a young centre-half himself in terms of Kyle Cameron, because we've got high hopes for him playing perhaps in the centre of that 3 years, that kind of ball-winning, kind of aggressive central defender. And like I say, he was probably taught a vicious lesson, but obviously, typical as Twitter, isn't it? As I was tweeting out the fact that Kyle Cameron had been rolled twice and was alarmed for it, he then pops up with a header and all is forgiven.
Header,
all is forgiven. But one thing I was going to say, Waleed, if that's all right, was a previous episode that we've looked at has kind of come back to relevance, really. And it's interesting what you were saying about the striker role at Aldershot, really, and the variety and I suppose the evolution in terms of the striking role, because we've looked at Kyle Wootton previously, who I thought gave a really good account of himself against Aldershot. But how would you think the striker role has evolved? Because obviously the way that we judge strikers, or we used to judge strikers probably before analytics and those sort of things, is simply output, in terms of goals and those sort of things. But how do you think that role has changed? What sort of skill sets do we think we need to be looking for in an ideal striker, if you were looking for one, let's say?
That's such a good question, and it's something which I have really learnt at a rapid pace since I came on board as the academy director, albeit first of all working with the academy boys, and we'll talk more about that. But of course, you want to look at the foundations in the academy to see how they're going to fit in with the first team, and then the first team are going to look around and see what else is going on in the world of football. And if I take a look at centre forwards going back to my century, your Martin Chivers, your Peter Osgoods, your Malcolm McDonald's, true number 9s who stayed up there, and Martin Chivers, who were there, the true number 9s. Now, when you take a look, even with Wasim, who's come on loan to us from Charlton, super player, Mo Bettimer, good, strong player, Harrison, who played centre forward, number 10 for us. Kind of the role seems to be that you go out wide and then you cut inside. And so is there a really true number 9 role playing anywhere? Maybe there are, maybe the likes of Rooney, he might be one of them who's doing that. And Rowe, he might be doing that. But even he's never playing right at that traditional number 9 role at all. You don't see him that. He's kind of playing back, and then he'll be smart and use his experience to get in behind. And I think that's what it's all about now, being smart, certainly coming out. And I see this at the academy level, even the boys that we've produced, who Tommy Willard, he was our leading goal scorer last year, scored 27 goals, but he played out wide, but he was our goal scorer. So the anathema is, hang on, he's a goal scorer, but you're playing him out wide. Well, that's the way the game has now certainly evolved in what I can see for centre forwards. And same with Mo, he's right-footed, so we'll have him playing out, coming inside, and then hopefully getting the link play. So it's more about link play, I think, these days, and getting those number 10s and the number 8s maybe. And of course, the wing backs play such a big part these days. If you're going to go 3 across the back, so you're looking to have that link play all the time. And is there a traditional number 9 up? I'd probably struggle hard to find one. nowadays, certainly in my days, as I say, the previous century. So it's certainly very, very much a steep learning curve for me to see that.
Yeah, I think we've seen that a little bit with Kyle Wotton as well. I mean, Kyle's a big, strong number 9. Yeah, you can see that with him.
Yeah.
He's got great hold-up play. He's been a lot better this season than he has been previous seasons, because he was probably picking himself off the ground a bit more than he should have been last season, and looking for the fouls and things. And I'm not saying that he wasn't getting fouled, because he seemed to get a bad run with the officials as well last season. But certainly over the start of this season and the back end of last season, we were starting to see that sort of development that you're talking about. There were a number of occasions where he would be peeling off to the left or the right and providing that support play rather than being the one waiting, for the opportunity in the box. And this was something that we spoke about at some length on a previous pod, which is why we asked, because we talked about the evolution of the target man and how it's changed. Those players that you mentioned back in the day that, I'm of a similar almost age as you, Waleed, but they're players that I remember playing when I was a kid, and it was all blood and thunder in those days as well. And there was not as much finesse to the game as there is now. So it is interesting how that's developed and changed for sure.
So, guys, I've got one for you, and I wonder if that's also now to do a lot with, and I'm trying to reflect back again in my era, the centre backs, or the centre halves as they were called. They weren't as big as the giants that we see now, possibly as well.
Yeah.
And maybe that's why the attacking, goal scoring players have got to have had to think, well, what can we do? And obviously, coaching has evolved as well, and coaching methodology has evolved, and maybe that's got something to do with it now, because you've got massive. I mean, everybody who we play against at Aldershot are giants against our team. Yeah. But you certainly do see very, very big and strong centre backs. So maybe that's something to do with it as well.
Yeah, quite possibly. What are your thoughts on that, Colin?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, one of the things that we talked about with Notts and kind of thinking about, the attacking threat, and also the difficulties, I think even very recently in terms of the pandemic, clubs were limited in terms of what they could do in terms of training, limiting numbers and those sort of things. So I thought that defences were very well organised for things like set plays and those sort of things. And again, you've got big units at the back there. So clubs are having to think of ways around those centre halves rather than perhaps going through them like, the traditional strikers that we've talked about, kind of going 1v1 and those sort of things, is actually finding other solutions in terms of navigating around these centre halves that are often, as I said, particularly in the National League, I think very well drilled in kind of that defensive shape. It's trying to think of actually what's the second or third ball off there, how are we going to attack slightly differently. If we pelt it into the back four and they repel it, we should be expecting them to repel it. And how else do we get in from there in the kind of the second or third attack? So yeah, it's absolutely fascinating, and equally, I'm sure we could talk about at length to how centre halves have therefore changed then, because we're talking about, Kyle Cameron particularly, as a centre half who's as much of a threat with the ball at his feet, or we saw it with Alex Lacey, didn't we, as well, particularly, those kind of mid to long range passes coming out from the back, which, I predominantly played in goal. I had a little bit of a spell as a centre half at like under 7, under 8, and I definitely wasn't advised to be passing it and pinging it across the pitch. It was very much about, if in doubt, knock it out. So like I say, I think there's been some fascinating evolution really, and I think that's what makes the National League particularly a fascinating thing to see, because often I think we find initiatives starting with clubs who've got limited resources and they're trying to think of the best ways of using them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
I'm conscious of the fact that we might be a bit pushed for time for yourself, Waleed. So sure. I'd like to push on if it's okay but just a couple more things from the game on Saturday. One of them being that there were a couple of lads took to the pitch for Aldershot that you were very happy about, because I think there were 2 young lads that you've spent, or the academy certainly had around the place prior to the season.
Yeah, absolutely, yes. I mean, last year when I sat down with Danny in developing the pathway, which we developed 2 years ago, myself and Ross McNeely, who's the academy manager. So the 5 boys that came through all got contracts, and Tommy and Ellis have been regularly involved since the season started. Alfie's been on the bench a lot as well, Alfie Saunders. But Ellis is a star. He will be a star. I mean, he came on. And
Ellis Watts, yeah?
Ellis Watts, yeah. And when he came on, and I've watched the footage where he picked up the ball from the edge of the 18-yard box, took it, kept going. He's a very confident boy and believes in his game. Took it, and then I think there were 2 defenders, turned them both inside out, and then still had the calmness to look up and then play a channel ball with the outside of his foot to Wasim, who'd peeled off to get that ball. And you think he's only 19 and he's doing that. And Tommy Willard, as I said, he started the first 2 games of the season, might even start the first 2 definitely, then came on. So he's been involved in all 4 games. And they're both from academy boys. Tommy scored 27 goals for us last year for the under-23s. And Tommy's only 20 as well. Excellent. So we're hoping that from the first team perspective, that they get more time. And, so I'm trying to keep them. I make it a big point after the games to go and talk to them specifically and let them say, well, calm down, boys. This is all part of a learning process, but continue to convey your confidence.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's obviously such an important route for these guys as well, for a club like Aldershot, for you to be able to do that. And I think because we spoke previously as well about another young lad, Reece Wiley, which is now he is now at Forest, isn't he? He's in the I think he's in the under-23 set up at Forest, is he?
So we were told again on the weekend. We're waiting for 100% confirmation. The offer's been made. The offer's been accepted. Reece still is an England schoolboy. Yeah, played for England and got his cap because of COVID. It was all delayed, so he got his caps sometime in the summer. And he was with us since the age of 9. So again, development has been great for us. So we're keeping a close eye on him and wishing him extremely all the best. So yes, he's with your neighbours.
Yeah. Well, he was somebody, after speaking to you about him, that I kind of mentioned on a previous podcast as well, and we were looking at roles that he might be able to fit. If Notts were looking for somebody young and talented, and typically he's over the river. So the less said about that now, the better. But obviously, it must be a very proud moment for you, because you've seen him grow and develop, through the stages of the academy there at Aldershot. So that's great stuff.
Very much.
Just before we leave about the game on Saturday, there was one other guy that we've spent quite a bit of time talking about, myself and Colin, and on the pods as well, and that's Jacob Barkley Ajipong, and we've done quite a bit of how can I put it? We've promoted him a little bit because we quite like him. We think he's got quite a bit about him, and at half time on Saturday, myself and Colin were messaging each other, and both of us thought he was probably the best player on the pitch in that first half. And I suspect you'd probably agree, would you?
Absolutely. Those of us that were there from the Aldershot contingent, and some of the home fans as well, we could hear them saying, he looks really good. He's been in control of the game. Everything he's doing is good. And we're delighted. We're really delighted that he's come back to us for a second time. We loved him the first time around as well. As is football, things may not work out first time round, and you always hope they're going to work out if you get an opportunity second time round. And if it's with the club you were at, even better for us. So we're JBA started good. He started the season really good, all 4 games. He's had loads of energy, which has been great for us to see. Making all the runs, making the plays as well. We just want him to score 7, 8, 9, 10 goals now, please.
Yeah, well, thankfully, he completely cocked up that that glorious chance he had to score on Saturday.
I was hoping you weren't going to pick that up.
Yeah, it was his wrong foot, I think, wasn't it? But yeah, just talking about his energy. I mean, I'm just going to bring something up on the screen very quickly here that I picked up from this. This was from Saturday's game, and these were his action areas. His action areas in the game. I don't know if you can see that, Waleed.
I can.
Yeah. So obviously the blue dots are where he's been successful in an action, and the black crosses are where he hasn't been. So I think the blue dots just about outweigh the black crosses there. But, you know, he certainly covers some ground, doesn't he?
That is very interesting to see. That really is very interesting. But it's good to see that he's in his core area where we want to see him playing. So you've got him in that second, third, depending on which way you're going.
Sure.
But it's good to see him in there. Yeah. So that again is a reflection of what's been great this season. He's also made a lot of recovery challenges back.
Yeah.
Which is what we need. We need that
absolutely.
as well. So he's been good. You know,
I mean, the thing that stood out for me as well, and I must admit, kind of kept a close eye on him from his earlier games, is his passing's phenomenal. You know, in terms of his data, in terms of his passing, when you compare it to the rest of the National League, you know, he's sort of 80% kind of successful passes. But the one thing that I've noticed that's coming into his game, I think, is I kept an eye on his early game. I think it was one of the early games was Chesterfield. Is that right?
Yes, first game.
Yeah. Fantastic in terms of retaining the ball, but it wasn't necessarily forward passes. It was, you know, passes backwards to obviously keep the ball and retain it, obviously to find those shapes. Whereas against Notts, he was really finding those forward passes, really finding those kind of avenues to play the ball down, playing it in channels, really kind of clever use of the ball. So we're going to be following him very interestingly in terms, because he seems to be on a kind of trajectory. Obviously started well, but here we are sort of game 3, game 4. And we're really starting to see those extra bits of his game flourishing. And I suppose it's probably down to a new squad or new squad members all coming together, understanding when they're going to run, where they're going to run. And so hopefully, you know, he's on a kind of crest of a wave, if you like.
Yeah, absolutely. We hope so.
Yeah, just talking about his passing, as luck would have it, I've actually I've got this from Saturday's game as well. The 3 dotted lines are where he's misplaced a pass. Everything else is essentially his accurate passes, and there was a key pass in there as well that obviously there might have been a shot assist from that or something as well. So again, that kind of emphasises what you were talking about there, Colin. If you look at the direction and the area of those passes, it does give you an indication of the fact that he's thinking more about retention of the ball as well as just pushing forward.
I think key pass is the actual assist, isn't it? It was the assist. I think he actually got the assist for the goal.
Yeah.
Yes, he did. Yeah, for Corey's goal. Yeah,
that's right.
That is very interesting.
Yeah. So anyway, that's Saturday out of the way. We won't keep digging it up, Waleed. We know it's probably not what you want to be hearing all of the time this evening. It's great for us, but probably not so much for you. But yeah, I mean, moving on. I mean, obviously, your role then within Aldershot, and I just wondered whether you could just give us a little bit of a background of yourself and how you got involved, and what it's like, sort of being a director in a club like Aldershot, and some of the challenges that you might face as well.
So after I decided to retire in 2015. My goal was always to get my coaching badges, only because I love the game. So I got my coaching badges with the Army FA because of the town. Aldershot is close to where I live.
Yeah.
And on spec, I wrote to Aldershot Town Football Club, being my local club, expecting not to hear anything back. But I was invited to work with the first team when Gary Waddock was there, and James Rowe. Okay. And I just could not believe it at that time. And of course, that season, nothing to do with me, but we made the playoffs, had a tremendous run. And we had people like Mensah and Will Evans there who'd come from, and JBA, who'd come from big clubs. In fact, Cody was there as well. Cody had just come to us from Villa at that time. So I just attended pre-season training and, learned from Gary Waddock what he was doing, listening to him, and they gave me full access. And then I did it the following season as well. So I got my coaching badges. And in that time, I got to know people at the club. they got to know my background in the commercial world, and they said, "Would you like to come on board as a director?" And that was manna from heaven for me. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
Couldn't believe it. And then the role of the academy director was offered very shortly after I took to the board, came onto the board, and then I haven't looked back. Just absolutely loved it, getting involved with the football side of things. Of course, I've got a financial responsibility as well, because we have to fund the business as well. We're not an EFL club where the academies are funded effectively, so we fund through various avenues, and one of them, of course, is the education side of where we run a very, very successful education program. So been involved and really changed a lot, bringing in I brought in a parent pathway committee, because without the parents, we don't want them running the club, but we need them there. We need them on our side. So we set that up. And then with Ross, we've started to get everybody to buy into the philosophy of, first and foremost, good human beings. That's the boys.
Yeah.
And then we all want you to be successful footballers, but we would not be doing our duty if we didn't make you good human beings, because the chances of making it in football are going to be very, very slim.
Yeah, absolutely.
We want all of you to be successful, but we have to be realistic. And yes, so we're on we're moving upwards nicely.
Yeah.
Things are looking good.
Excellent. And when, looking at the academy and getting kids involved and the trajectory that you have for them within the club as well, I noticed, I had a quick look on the Shots website, and I think there were two kind of pathways. One was, I think, very educational, as you say, but then you could progress from that into the more professional football development side of things as well.
Correct.
So from the early ages, are you actually at that very early age of, say, I don't know what the youngest age is that you've probably got coming in, maybe 6-7 years old. Yes. Sometimes. Yes. Yeah. So when you're you're looking at these kids, is there anything in particular that you're looking for, or is it a case of, look, as many of you want to come as you want to come, we'll have a few sessions, we'll do whatever, and we'll see what comes out? Or have you got to be very specific about who you allow to come into that pathway?
We want to have a bit of both, because it is a cycle that we need to keep topping up, because as the 23s will move out, we'll have everybody starts moving a step up. So we need to be understanding where the little ones are. Yeah. And so the coaches we've got are pretty much all UEFA B and UEFA A coaches.
Okay.
They'll be attuned into looking at the development side of things, which is absolutely critical. The fun side of things is very, very important as well at that particular age group. And certainly up until about the age of 12, we'll still look for that fun side of it. But we will now expect those 10, 11, 12-year-olds to start to have an understanding of teamwork, what it's like to play as a team. And it's not just me running with the ball and everybody else is, thinking, oh, okay, here we go again. We're not going to get a pass because Richard's got the ball.
Yeah.
And then, of course, what I've learned, and of course the coaches are attuned to this, is that maturation can happen at different stages.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you'll see, hang on, you were 3 foot nothing last year and you're now 6'7". Where did that come from?
Yeah.
You've got to kind of be ready for that. And then, and the coaches are attuned into that. Then how do we then change the development plans for the boys? So it's a bit of both.
Yeah.
Fun is the key thing, but we are an elite academy. So we were given elite academy status 2 years ago. And so we like to pride ourselves on development as the key. Fulham, we coach Fulham under 12s and under 15s.
Okay.
So we're hoping that the Fulham contract will be renewed. Southampton, I've just been speaking with Southampton. We went down to Staplewood, and their lead coach has been in touch with me, asking can we benchmark some of their international players, because they have many global academies.
Sure.
And so they've said, look, we've played against you guys. We like what what we've seen. Can you benchmark? Charlton have said the same as well. I was speaking to the under-18s, under-23s coach at an event a few weeks ago, and he was saying, can we have some friendlies against your academy to benchmark our boys?
Okay,
So
yeah,
development is the key.
Yeah.
And we pride ourselves on that.
Okay, it's interesting because one of the things I was going to ask was, especially where you're located as well, and you've just mentioned 2 or 3 of the clubs there, it must be very difficult for you to find those diamonds in the rough, because you've got these Premier League clubs and Championship clubs that are obviously just going around and sweeping everybody up. So it must make it a lot harder.
You're so right. You're so right, Richard. And to that, I would say probably as high as 30% of our boys from across the various age groups would be coming to us from London.
Yeah.
Outside, way outside of the county. So yes, you make a very, very good point there. So we have to work doubly hard because we've got Reading just on the doorstep. Chelsea are not a million miles away. Fulham are not. Southampton are in our county. Portsmouth are in our county. So we do have some challenges there as well. Yeah.
Waleed, how big a threat is things like, so I know that pre-academies have happened for years, but they've started to become regulated now. And obviously we hit the topic of kind of youth development because of Notts and because we're in a very intense sort of youth development area with our neighbours who shouldn't be mentioned across the river, as well as obviously clubs like Birmingham, Villa, those sort of things. So how much is the threat of that, of kind of clubs really sort of establishing that pre-academy kind of age group? Because obviously you're already fighting tooth and nail with some pretty challenging clubs.
It's a very good question. And Richard forwarded me a article to read earlier on this evening, and I was kind of mulling over that and just bouncing it off of my academy manager as well. We've been running pre-academy for the last couple of years as well, and it doesn't happen overnight. It does take time to develop. So it took us almost a year, 18 months to get a pre-academy function in place, because it's all about numbers. You're not going to get the numbers straight away. So those numbers, there's a cost, which we ask mums and dads to cover. The bigger boys, they don't have to ask mum and dad to cover. So we're just going to have to kind of see how this pans out, and see how seriously the pre-academy sector starts to really explode. Pre-academy for us at our level is still a fun area. It is still a place where we want to get boys and girls coming in at a professional football club, at an elite academy. But this is about fun. But if you want to do other things, you can.
Yeah.
But there is always that but. Mum and dad, there is going to be an associated cost, which we need obviously to cover, and that is going to be a big challenge, Colin, for us. That it'll be the cost. The branding, of course, will be another challenge as well. I'm sure, if somebody's got a choice of going to Reading or to come to us, and then it's the choice of what are the costs, then I guess we're going to lose out. So it's even more important that we do the development that we're doing right now and continue to concentrate on that very much. And
I suppose, like to bring this round full circle, games like we saw against Notts, where you had academy products turn up and get game time, that's where you're going to secure right from pre-academy all the way through, because you've got proven pathways to the first team.
That's certainly the vision. That's certainly the mission statement that we've got out there, and that's what we're working hard to do. Yeah.
Oh, excellent. That's really interesting to know, Waleed. Thanks for that. I'm just noticing the time.
Yes.
I think you're off to do some training anyway, aren't you?
Yes, I had to go and beg, steal, and borrow some mannequins from the under-23s today. So I'm going to look really professional tonight when I turn up with my boys.
Brilliant. Okay. Well, I don't think. Have you got anything else, Colin, that you'd like to just throw at Waleed before he shoots off? Or
probably the best thing, and this is really sort of relevant to the fact that you're rushing off to training. I don't know if you've seen it, but something that's hitting a lot on social media is Fylde's recent job advert that has took an awful lot of flack about kind of how it's not, it's not a 9 to 5 and don't be expecting to pick the kids up a couple of times a week. And I suppose because there'll be people watching this, and obviously, really, I mean, I find your story fantastic in the sense of being able to kind of get into a club and be able to do that. Because I'm sure there's plenty of people watching that would like to do the same. What is the reality like? How close or far away is the Fylde kind of job spec in your opinion? Were they right to sort of highlight those sort of things, or should it be taken with a bit of tongue in cheek?
I think they've tried to be honest, and I think they've tried to be a bit of tongue in cheek. And of course, we all know PC these days is so prevalent out there. And I can relate to that. I'm fortunate in that I picked it up when I was retired. My mentor, who still I speak to, said to me, you'll enjoy your role because you're a student of the game. And I thought, well, what does that mean? And he said, well, because you like to learn about football and you want to learn about what's going on. So I think the advert might have been better saying, if you're a student of the game, we're going to love to have you on board. I came on board with the role of the academy director, expecting to do 1 day a week. Well, it's 8 days a week right now, but I love it. And it can be all time consuming. So I think they make the right points about work balance and life balance. They make the points, but perhaps they could have been a little bit more nicer about how they made those points. But I think they're valid points, definitely, because if you're like the three of us, we love the game. Yeah. And once you get immersed in it, and for me, the best thing, even when I was working in the corporate world, was to see your service manager progress to becoming a service director. So Richard can relate to that. So here you can see a young boy progressing and then progressing again. And that means he's learning from you, and not learning from me, but learning from my coaches and learning from the philosophy you've got out there. So good advert, but I think perhaps they could have had a different choice of words.
Excellent.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Definitely. Okay. Look, Waleed, thank you ever so much for joining us on this episode. It's been a real pleasure. Really great to find out a little bit more about yourself and your role, and give us a bit more of an insight as well into what it's like and some of the challenges that you face, in a club at our level, when it comes to the academies. But thank you so very much for joining us.
Gentlemen, thank you for inviting me. I was humbled and honoured. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers.